There you go. Thank you. So what we're going to do in the second half of the training here is we're going to go through a much deeper dive into advanced queries, which is really the heart of CDV, as you can probably already tell. And there's a lot of power there just in the limited bit of the interface that I've shared with you so far. But this combination of location in the form of areas of interest and a bunch of criteria, crash focuses, query levels, result fields, etc. It makes for the ability to query this data in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to continue on if you don't mind. So let's take a deeper dive. So I shared with you a simple drawing tool here with the location before the break. So I did a rectangle and showed you what that looks like. Each of these different types of graphics that you can draw are slightly different in how you do it. As I mentioned before the break, when you do a rectangle, you just essentially click that. And then what you saw when I drew it is you just drag a rectangle from opposing corner to opposing corner, right? However, a couple of the other ones, circle is done the same way, where you I'll show you in a moment, where you drag from the center of the circle out to the radius. And then polygons, lines, and points are entirely differently. And as I mentioned before the break, one of the key things to point out is that points and lines don't result in a boundary or a polygon, where you'll see when you have a polygon or closed boundary after drawing, you have the add to AOI button, as you see in the bottom graphic here, illuminates to green. When you first draw a point or a line, that's not going to be the case. You have to use this in this little control in the middle of the dialog here to generate a search radius and create a polygon. So basically what you're seeing here is the stuff you hear on the left. This is the big note. We must buffer a point or a line. If you need to reset the graphic anytime along the lines with the reset button, you can do that, and it sort of clears everything. So let's just go out and draw a couple of these things, okay? Whoops, previous. Let me come back out here. Okay, so I'm going to reset all. This button here we haven't used yet, but I'm going to basically just do a reset all just to show you what this does. Reset all is going to reset. It's going to clear our AOI. It's going to clear any criteria. It's going to clear whatever we may have done with an initialize function, and it's going to clear the results grid and the map. So I'm going to hit reset all. It says, are you sure? And I say yes, and it sort of clears everything out of here. Okay, so we have a clear results grid, clear map, no points in the map, and it's reset everything, and I'm back to step one. Okay, so let's start all over again here. So I'm not going to worry about exact query results fields here. Well, maybe I'll come in here and I will turn back on the basic crash details just to show you that. I'm going to try to do as many different queries when I do these examples as I can, and the reason is so that I can basically give you a sort of there's a saying, repetition is the mother of skill, right? So if I keep showing you things over and over again and revisiting things, I'm not trying to be repetitive in the sense of being boring. I'm trying to be repetitive in the sense of letting you see it multiple times and have it appear on the video in multiple times, hopefully. So, okay, so there, I've just reset this. I'm going to accept all the defaults, but I've set up a couple of result fields. So now let's just go through and do, I'm going to create a bunch of areas of interest using all the draw tools. So first of all, let's do a point. Let's say that I want to do a point, and I want to do a point right here. Now, if I do that, notice that my add to AOI button did not illuminate. The generate buffer is active now that I've drawn something, and I can change and customize this distance. So I could make this a 100-foot buffer, and then I just click generate buffer, and it makes a 100-foot buffer around that. Now I can add that to the AOI. Okay, so that's one way. So if you wanted to sort of do, why might you do a point? Well, maybe you want to do sort of just a manual intersection type thing. I want to look at all the crashes that are generally around this that are within 100 feet. Now, there's a much more sophisticated way of doing an intersection query like this instead of doing a manual 100-foot buffer around an intersection, as you actually can use the intersection area of influence polygon, which I'll show you in a few minutes, or you could do and digitize and select the intersection itself, just the intersecting point. Instead of digitizing a point about where you think it is, you can grab the actual intersection of Dove and Washington and buffer around that. So a number of different ways to do that. Let's do a line. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'll just do a line up here. So if I want to do a line from over here and just sort of trace my way up Lark, click another point and come partially way down to Washington, I'll double click there. So I just drew a line feature that goes like this. That's the extent of it. But once again, add to AOI, not there. Maybe I want to make this a 50-foot buffer. I generate around there. So there's a 50-foot buffer. I have to remember one of the things that constantly is a mistake that people make is they forget to click the add to AOI button. So right up here, I got draw 1. I can hit add to AOI, and now I have draw 2. Now, we'll be able to rename, if I hover over one of these, you'll see it says double click to rename it. So I can rename these, and I'll come back to some of the features that are up here in the AOI grid. Let's keep drawing though. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to draw a rectangle around a city block sort of. I'm going to draw a rectangle and I'll just sort of go right around this bottom corner of the park and so on. So there's a rectangle, add to AOI, draw 1, draw 2, draw 3. We'll do a circle around here. Right, and notice how I'm holding my mouse button down as I do this. Same thing with a rectangle. So there's a circle, add it to the AOI, and then I can do an irregularly shaped polygon. Now I am turned loose. I wanted to show you this. I'm turned loose. I'm going to start to digitize the polygon. And let's say that I want to digitize a polygon and it goes down off the screen over here. I'm going to start digitizing right here. Okay, and I'm going to come up here. And now if I wanted to come down here, click here, and now I wanted to go off the screen, I'm going to press and hold my mouse, but whoops, sorry, I double clicked here wrong, sorry. There's another little thing that I can show you how to do. In the middle of this, as I'm clicking, if I hit escape, it will interrupt the drawing here. But the polygon, this tool, I think I misspoke here, guys. I got to be honest with you here, is the polygon is one of those that you can't do this with, ironically. The reason is polygon is it will recognize what we call sort of trace symbology. So I can single click as I am now, but if I drag the mouse, it allows me to do what's called freeform digitizing. So this is perhaps the one tool that I chose to demo the opposite. It'll work on a lot of the other tools, but not the polygon tool. So I'm going to hit escape and do that way. So I'm going to pan the map over and so on. The arrows, yes, good point for whoever just said that. The other way that you can do it, in most cases, you can draw the map in the middle of digitizing. So for example, not with the draw tools, but with a lot of other tools when you're doing this, you can. But yes, the arrows will do the map. I am pressing my right arrow, and you can do it like that. So if you are in the middle of that, thanks for chiming in with that in the chat. That is helpful. The arrows do recenter the map. But in other than drawing here, in almost every other method when you're doing like building a path and doing other things, it will pan the map when you're active. So or when you're in the measuring tool. So if I'm measuring and I'm over here, see how I'm dragging the map in the middle of my measurement, and then I can keep going, drag it in the middle. So I can do that. So let me hit escape, get out of here. Okay, so let me come back over. So let me just do a quick polygon here. Sorry for the interruption, but glad it's sort of, and that if you see anything in that with the chat, by all means, I'll try to catch it. I'm seeing the chat in the upper right corner, which is also being captured on video. Gary will interact with the chat and answer questions, but when you see things like that to remind me, that's great. So I just digitized an irregularly shaped polygon. I'll add that. So now I've used all the draw tools. I have 5 different, one for each of these, draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I go out and I do and execute a query right now, it will use all 5. Okay, it'll use all 5. So let's do this. So I'm going to go next to my criteria. And what I could do here is I could say, I want to do, serious injury, K's and A's in here. So I'm going to execute, and I'm going to find a series of crashes that'll fall within all of these AOIs. So I've got 2 that fell within here. So 1 that fell over here. Actually, let me clear these and try to get more crashes for you here. I'm just going to clear these and let it go through and do all these. So I'm going to probably get, I imagine I probably get a couple hundred crashes in here. Yeah, 197. So you can see, and the thing that's interesting is that, we really don't have many crashes in here because I digitized sort of inside of the road network here. But those where I intersected roads, I've got a little bit of crashes in all of these, right? So I've got some over here, I've got some up around here, and I can sort of walk through here and view any of these. Once again, the crashes are being symbolized by the severity here. So we can see a lot of these are property damage in terms of crash severity. Once again, if I wanted to turn over, just to repeat this, if I wanted to turn off the areas of interest and not see these polygons, I can come over here to the layer list, and I can come over here and just turn off areas of interest temporarily, right? And there they are. Okay, so that's a little bit about the drawing tool. So once again, we'll come over here, go back to the slides, and we'll continue on. Okay, here we go. Build path. So this is a different tool. This allows you to build a path between an origin and a destination. It will automatically generate the least path, least distance path, least cost distance. It's sort of using the networking tools to get you there. And then you can actually add barriers along that, which, probably has limited use cases, but if you knew that, construction caused roads to be closed for a certain time and you wanted to observe that when you were looking at distances between 2 points and paths, that's fine. But basically, this will automatically buffer the distance. The default is 20 feet, so this will result in a polygon that you can add to the AOI immediately. You can reset the tool at any time. So let's just jump off here and just do one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here back to location, okay? And I'm going to click the remove all. I'm going to get rid of all of these. Well, maybe I'll do a couple things first. First, I'll get rid of a couple of these. So I'm going to get rid of the last one here first. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit just to sort of show you how you would know what is what. When I did these, maybe what I wanted to do is say, I'm going to double click in here and say, this was the polygon, right? And I don't remember which one that was. I just remember that. So I can double click in here, and I'll come back to this, and I can rename these AOIs so that you would know, well, which one do I want to remove? So I'll remove the polygon. So I remove that one. Now I'm left with just 4, and I'll remove this one. So I can remove individual AOIs. But what if I said, okay, I want to rename these now, and I don't remember which was which? Well, how do I figure it out? Well, one thing you can do is you can zoom and flash. So if I said, well, which one was this one? When I click flash, if you notice, it's over here. So let me sort of zoom in a little bit so you can see it flash a little bit better. But when I flash this one, that's the circle, okay? So that one's over here. So what I can do is I can rename that one. And then if I highlight this one, I click over here, that's that one, right? And if I click over here, it's off the screen, so I can't see it flashing, but that's the rectangle, right? So I can do all these types of things. So, and I'm going to click remove all, and I'm going to remove all the areas of interest because I'm going to do a path now. And I'm not worried about the crashes being in my query results grid. That's perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you build path. So build path, let me zoom out a little bit, is I could say, well, I'm going to build a path from up here on Madison, and I'm going to come down over here. Let's see. Once again, here's another example. I'm in the middle of my build path. It's waiting for me to click another point, but I can drag this over here, and I'll come down here and click. And it builds this path right along here. And notice if I zoom in, it's automatically buffered this by 20 feet, and I have the ability to just add this directly to my AOI. Now, the other thing that I can do, though, is if I said, well, I want to add a barrier here, I could click and I can add a barrier right here, and it would automatically route me around that. Sorry, I double clicked here. It automatically routes me around that barrier, and it changes the path for me. So once again, probably limited use cases for that, but if you come across it, you can do it. So I'm going to go ahead and add that AOI to the map, and I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to, I don't want any more characteristics. I'm just going to go ahead and hit execute, and we now will end up with getting crashes along our path. So there we go. So we got 68 crashes in that 3-year period along that particular path, right? And I can click, click on this type of, tool here and see that what this crash number is here. And one thing to note, just as a little usability, is when you have a lot of attributes in the pop-up dialog, it won't fit in the map window all the time. So what you have to do is just pan it down to close it, okay? No, that's a little bit of a pain. There's just no way around it when you have really robust pop-up windows with a lot of attributes and a limited map display. You know, that's one of the reasons why people like to sometimes either shrink this or go to full display, because now when I click here, it's going to be able to be fully seen, okay? And once again, you hit escape to go back to the app, okay? So that's a little bit about, let me go back over to step 2 here. That's a little bit about build path. I'll leave that guy, actually, let me remove him. All right, so I remove the area of interest again, and let's go down to select features. Sorry, let me go back to the slides first. So select feature, this is where you are going to select a geographic feature that's stored in another layer in our database, okay? And there are 8 different layers you can select from. So we can select from a county boundary, a municipal boundary. We can select a full route in our linear referencing system. We can select a street segment, intersection streets with a on street and cross street, an individual ramp, a DOT regional boundary, or an MPO boundary. Each dialog is slightly different when you pick it. You have typically a combination of select on map to just click on something, or a pick list. And for things such as this, when you have a select a feature type and you pick municipality, you'll have to first pick your county, then your municipality. If you don't use the select on map feature, if you want to go by the pick list, when you end up with choosing something that is a line feature, there are really no point features here. But if you pick something which is a street segment or a ramp, you will have to buffer things in the generate buffer just down here, just like you did in the previous examples with the draw point and draw line. So anything that doesn't result in a polygon or closed boundary, you're going to have to buffer. But if it's already a boundary, then you're good to go. So so let's just give you an example of what this looks like. So within select features, here are those 8 feature types I talked about. So let's say I'm going to do an MPO. So I can either click somewhere on the map within it, or I can just pick from the list of MPOs. So I'll pick CDTC. And since this is a boundary in and of itself, I can add this directly to the AOI. And you can see that it automatically, when you start picking feature types that have attributes, such as the name, you can actually see that it comes up with a reasonable AOI name right off the bat. So I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to go next, and I'm going to choose, obviously this is a very large area, so be very careful when you're setting up criteria, when you're using a DOT regional boundary or a municipal boundary or an MPO boundary, something very large, or you build a path or draw something that's very large. Be very careful that you don't just click execute. You're probably going to want to or need to, because there's a maximum number of crashes that will come back in a reasonable amount of time, is you're probably going to have to define your additional criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and choose fatal and serious injury crashes here, hit execute. So I'm going to grab all the crashes that are Ks and As within the CDTC MPO over that 3-year period, and I've got 983. Okay, and you can see how I have clustering. I've got 386 right here down the downtown Albany area, and so on and so forth. And as I start to wheel it in, you'll see the clustering start to refine itself until ultimately we start to see individual crash locations when we get in close enough, right? So very dynamic. I've got my 983 over here. So that's one way that you can do that. Let me go back over to location. I'll get rid of that area of interest, and I'll just do a select a different feature here. So I could go in, and let's say that I wanted to go down, I wanted to zoom around here and select an individual ramp, right? So I could actually say, well, I want to select a ramp feature, and I'm going to select it on the map, and I'm going to select this particular ramp feature here. So I grab this ramp feature that loops around here around I-90. But I don't have an add to AOI because it's a linear feature that I selected from the ramp layer. So what I need to do is buffer it, and I'll just take the default and say generate a buffer 20 feet around that, and it loops all the way around. Now I can add that to my AOI, and now I can go ahead and hit next, and I could actually generate, maybe I want to clear these guys because it's a small one, and grab all the crashes over a 3-year period, see if there are any on that ramp. Yep, we got 4, and you can see where these crashes all occurred, and you can start to make some assumptions about what's going on around the ramp. So though that's an example of the select feature function within AOIs. The next slide here is on select intersections. So this is different than the select. Let me go back to the previous slide. This intersecting streets is where you're picking intersecting streets. So actually, let me hit escape and go back out here and show you what this means. Let me just zoom over here and I'll zoom to some street intersection here, right? If I select features and I select an intersecting street, I can either select on streets of interest. I can select things, right? So I could say, well, within, let me show you the pick list of how you sort of drill down to this and how it populates, right? So maybe I want to select Albany County, and then it pre-populates with Albany County, the municipalities in the county. So I can pick that, and now notice what it's doing here. It's loading, I'm going to give it a second. It's loading all the street names that are valid in Albany County. I'm sorry, in the city of Albany within Albany County. So this is helpful. It takes a second for it to do this because it's loading it from this whole table, and there's a lot of street names that are valid within Albany County, including aliases and so on. So I'm going to choose, let's say, I'm going to pick literally a random thing. I'm going to pick Delaware Ave. And now what it's doing is it's loading. So it zooms to Delaware Ave, right? Here is Delaware Ave, the full street segment. And if I were looking, maybe I was looking for intersection of Delaware and Barkley. So when this comes back, this is loading and it's the intelligence. It does take a second to load the street names in both these cases, but it's giving you intelligent selection so you can't make a mistake. So these are the intersecting street names. So if I wanted to say Barkley, there we go. It's retrieving the intersection point, and it's going to basically zoom to the intersection and select that intersection of those two streets of Delaware and Barkley. Now, the reason that I do this is I just wanted to show you the difference between these guys, okay? So this point, let me zoom in here. This point is the intersecting point. It did not select an area of influence polygon, which is what I'm going to do in the next segment, but this is how you can do it. Now, I could have just selected and clicked on that intersection as well, but I wanted to show you a little bit with the drop downs. So I do have to generate a buffer around that. So once again, maybe I want a 50-foot buffer around it. I generate buffer. Now I can add it to my AOI, and this is the intersection of Delaware Ave and Barkley, right? So that's good. Now, just keep that in the back of your mind and contrast that with what I'm going to do now with selecting an intersection. This is selecting the point location of the street centerline intersection of those two, which is totally fine, totally valid. I could set a buffer zone and I can select crashes that occur within a certain distance of that physical intersection, okay? That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is I could go out here and I could say, sorry, let me come up here and I'm going to remove all my areas of interest and sort of start over. I'm going to show you the select intersection. So now let me go back to the slides. So select intersections is entirely different. It's not selecting the intersection of two street centerline segments. It is going, and which results in a point. This is going to allow me to search the master intersection layer, the statewide intersection layer, which has a series of attributes about them. It has the number of legs and the geometry of the intersection. You know, is there a crosswalk there, traffic control, lighting, etc. So we could select an intersection by clicking on the map, or what I could do is I could select a intersection based on attributes. And what I'm physically selecting is the area of influence polygon for that intersection, which can be immediately added to the AOI. However, that said, you'll notice down here that we have this little checkbox for single AOI, and that is when we are selecting by attribute. So I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to select an intersection specifically from the map, and then I'm going to select a series of intersections based on attributes. And I'll show you the difference. The one little wrinkle to this is if you're using a single intersection, you can click that Add to AOI button immediately once you find it. Well, I take that back. The Add to AOI button is in two different spots was the point I wanted to make here, is that if you select a single intersection, you'll have an Add to AOI button up here. And down below, you'll have another Add to AOI button, but with this little single AOI indicator. The single AOI indicator is that you'll see that when we select intersections, they show up in our query results panel in a slightly different form, and we can select more than one. and choose to either add them as individual AOIs. Let's say that we selected all four-legged intersections that are always stops within the city of Albany that have a crosswalk, etc. And we select a couple of them. We can add them all at once as a single area of interest polygon. There'll be multiple polygons we can add as a single area of interest, or we could add them individually if we uncheck this. So the easiest way to do this is, let me just demonstrate this to you. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just remove all these records here so that you start over here. So let me just show you this. So I'm going to zoom over here. And I'm going to zoom over here to, and let me show you another little piece here of how we can zoom to an intersection. We were sort of searching for intersections with the select feature tool, but let me just show how you can, you can zoom to one up here. So I'm going to type in Delaware Avenue, okay? And now here's how you can zoom. So I could zoom to just Delaware Avenue, the segment, which would be about where we were down here. But I want to zoom to the intersection of Delaware Avenue and Lark Street. The way that you can zoom to an intersection is by using an ampersand sign. Delaware Avenue and Lark Street, and notice it comes up with the little geocoder, the behind the scenes, and it says, oh, I know that there's two roads that intersect there. So if I click it, it's going to zoom to that intersection. It gives me a little pop-up that I can close. So this is the intersection of Lark and Delaware, okay, which Delaware is also, this runs in, Lark is over here, Delaware, Madison Ave is here, etc. So this is an interesting intersection, to say that 5 times fast. It's an interesting intersection from the standpoint is that it's not a traditional, T intersection with 3 legs or a 4-legged intersection. This has got a little more complexity to it, and it's a little bit more of an interesting polygon when we look at the area of influence. So if I wanted to select this, I can click select on the map to select a single intersection, and there it is. So what you see here is that the intersection is selected, but what I selected is not the point at which all those line segments intersected. I selected the area of influence polygon from the master intersection inventory. What it did is, for the first time, I'm seeing a different tab in the results grid. Instead of query results for crashes, I have another tab that now shows intersection search results. And this is the intersection I selected from the master intersection inventory. So I can see that this is a 5-legged intersection. It's got a marked crosswalk. It's signalized, including a PED signal. It's push button actuated, right? Is there lighting? Yes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. If I want to add, so I just selected a single intersection, but as I sort of alluded to earlier on the slide, is that the Add to AOI button for intersections work a little bit differently. It's not illuminated yet because I have the ability to select it, highlights it, and now I can add that to my AOI. So if I scroll back up, that's the intersection. So if I knew that was intersection 2011598, I could have typed it here, which many of you will not. Most of you will not, nor do I. But nevertheless, that's how you can select a single intersection. The other way that I could do this is I could select intersections based on criteria. So I want to select, maybe I want to add several intersection areas of influence. Now, please don't get concerned or confused with this term. I'm using the term area of influence, this, an area of interest. That's why I keep using the term AOI for an area of interest, so that I'll try to say area of influence when I'm referring to these intersection polygons. So this is an area of influence I've added to the AOI list. What if I want to add more than one? So let's go off and use the same search for intersections a different way. Let's say, well, I want to search for all the intersections where it's in Albany County, in the city of Albany, and I want an intersection type of roadway that's regular roadway that's not interchange related. And I want a number of legs to be 4. I want a 4-legged intersection, and I want the traffic control to be an all-way stop. Okay? Albany, City of Albany, regular roadways, 4-legged intersection, all-way stop. I'm going to go off and find those, and it's going to come back and it's going to update my search results. And I have 65 intersections that, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see their areas of influence being all around there, and they all look like crosses because these are all 4-legged intersections, right? So they all look similar, okay? Now, if I wanted to add some of these, this is where, notice once again, my Add to AOI button is not illuminated. I have to select one or more, and once I select at least one, that'll come green. However, as I mentioned earlier, this single AOI is what I would check to say, do I want to add more than one? So let's say that I want to go and zoom. Let me zoom to this particular intersection. So here's Helderberg and Hollywood. Maybe that one I want to add. And maybe let me zoom over to Austin and Pinehurst, two totally separate intersections. And I go, yeah, I want to add that as well. Well, they're in completely different, so I just zoomed out to the extent of these. But if I wanted to add both of these as a single AOI, where I would have one AOI that would be comprised of two polygons, which is totally legal, I could click Add to AOI here with single AOI. If I uncheck that and I hit Add to AOI, these are both going in as separate AOIs. So I'm going to do that so that it's more clear to you guys, right? So here we go. And once again, I could rename this and I could say this is, whichever one they are, Helderberg and whatever, right? I don't remember which was which. I'd have to go back and look, but you get the picture, is that I can literally replace these intersection IDs with the names of the roads and so on, right? So that is how we can use select feature or select intersections to add areas of influence to our AOI, okay? And then lastly, the last one, let me go back over to the slides, is we can import a shapefile. So I can import a shapefile that contains polygon features. It has to contain only polygon features, and the shapefile must be zipped, okay? Assuming, because a shapefile, if you know anything about, Esri software like ArcGIS Desktop, ArcGIS Pro, whatever you may use, shapefiles can have, they're basically comprised of multiple files. If you looked at Windows Explorer, you'd see it's a .shp and a .dbf and a .shx. So we have to zip them so we can point at one file and they'll figure it out. But when you click this, you literally just go import, you select the zip file, which the zip is essentially compressing it, and then the polygons that are in there are extracted and they're added to the AOI grid. It doesn't matter what the attributes of the polygons are, by the way, they get ignored. So it only uses the geometry in the shapefile. And if the shapefile contains multiple polygons along the same lines of what I just showed you with intersections, areas of influence, if the inner shapefile contains multiple polygons, they are added as a single AOI. If you really wanted to have multiple AOIs for each polygon, you should store them in separate shapefiles. So I'm going to actually do that now. I'm going to actually come in here. I'm going to do a remove all, say remove all my areas of interest. I'm going to collapse that. So I've shown you these top four. I'm going to go to import shapefile and I'm going to click import. And it's going to come up and I have this shapefile called Flushing Multiple. Flushing Multiple, when I open it up, I double clicked on it, and this is three sort of randomly drawn polygons that I made down in Flushing, down near Queens, right? And so here are three areas of interest, and it's very simple. They go in with the name of Flushing Multiple, whatever the name of that shapefile, zipped shapefile was, and it's very simple. And then I can just continue on from here. So that's how you set the different methods for area of interest. Okay, hope that makes sense. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to just draw a couple. I'm going to draw another rectangle down here to get another one in, and I'm going to build a path here quickly and go path from over here to over here. I don't even know exactly where I'm clicking. Boom, add that to an AOI. I just wanted to get a few in here so that I can show you how these areas of interest go from the grid, because that is the next slide. So when we've added areas of interest using any of those five methods, I can use as many different methods as I want. They can all be together. They can be separate. It doesn't matter. As I showed you a little bit earlier, I can double click inside the name and it will let me rename it. Why do you want to rename it? Well, maybe what you're going to do is you're going to share your query that I'll show you later. We're going to save the query and share it with others. And when they open it, you want them to be able to see which AOI is which one is a path, which one is a drawing tool, which one is a street intersection, what the streets are, etc. We also have 5 different tools that we can use to manage each individual AOI, and they're like this. This guy right here is the flash tool. It'll flash the thing, the symbology 3 times on the map. This will zoom to the geographic extent of that AOI. This will let you edit the AOI polygon after it's already drawn. Now, this only applies to a drawing graphic. So if you drew a polygon or a rectangle or a line, you would be able to change that and edit it later. I'll show you that in a minute. This allows you to actually, I just showed you how to import a shapefile as an AOI. This will let you export this graphic, this boundary that you drew, or maybe the build path. This will let you export the polygon to a shapefile that you could give to somebody else that could then import it as an AOI. Follow me? So it might be, this is another way you can share things with other users. Hey, I just drew this really sophisticated path, or I drew this graphic. I'm going to just export it to a shapefile, email you the zipped shapefile, and say, hey, if you ever want to use this area of interest, here you go, right? And then we can delete or sort of remove this AOI. And then the group management, I already showed you remove all. Export all will be exporting all of these to a shapefile in one shapefile. So if I exported all three of these polygons would go into the same shapefile. And if I hit zoom to all, it'll zoom to the geographic extent of all of these. So let's just go in and just play around with this a bit. So here is all of these. So I just drew a path, random path a moment ago. So if I say zoom to all, it's going to zoom to all my areas of interest. So these are the 3 polygons that came from the shapefile import from Flushing. Here's a rectangle that I drew on the fly, and here's the build path I just did on the fly. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, if I wanted to export all of these to a shapefile, I could hit export all, and it exports all of these to a shapefile called areaofinterest.zip, and it's right here. It's stuck in my downloads folder. Happens very quickly. No big deal. Okay. If I wanted to, I'll hold off on remove all, obviously. So if I wanted to flash the Flushing multiple, if I click this, watch over here. See how it highlights, flashes 3 times in orange? Or if I do this drawing, which is the rectangle. If I want to zoom, let's say to the path, I can go down here and click zoom, and it will zoom down to that. That's odd. Individual zoom didn't work. Interesting. Okay. We'll come back to that later. That should work. If I wanted to edit this, now this guy is only graphics. I can't edit a path, but I can edit, these are graphics that came in as graphics from the importing shapefile and then the graphic I drew. So if I actually wanted to go and edit this, so I could say edit, it will turn me loose with these guys, right? So it'll turn me loose, and I can click in these, and when I'm done, I can hit complete. So I can click inside here, and once I click inside it, it shows me all the points, or what we call the vertexes or vertices, and I can reshape these, okay? And when I'm done, I can hit complete. So I can edit anything that I've drawn as a graphic or imported as a shapefile. I can't edit a geographic feature that I've selected, or an intersection area of influence, or a path, but I can do imported shapefiles, which come in as graphics, or graphics I drew. I could export individual things to a shapefile, as I mentioned, and then I can obviously individually remove them. Okay, so that's all the different things. And once again, this I can double click and call this rectangle, and change the names of these things. So a lot of flexibility with the areas of interest in both how you manage them, how you might share them, etc. Okay, so that makes sense, hopefully. So back over to the slides quickly. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the query results grid. The query results grid allows you to really do a lot more than what we just showed. I have not shown you a vehicle or person level query yet on purpose, because we'll go there now and talk about this subheading here, where you will see the crash level details, vehicle level details, and person level details sort of highlighted of which fields are which, and you can collapse these. So if I do a person level query and we see all these fields go across from left to right, if I wanted to click and collapse the crash level fields, I can click this less than sign, and it'll collapse the crash details over. We have these columns and filters, which you can do very advanced things with. I'll show you in a minute an example of something very sophisticated, where we'll do a pivot table and have row groupings and calculated fields of counts. And it's just really, really cool. And then we'll talk about the grid tools here, where we have a whole series of things going on. So let's talk about the query results grid and the grid tools first. So across left to right, we have a zoom to selected button that'll zoom to the map to the extent of all the selected crashes. clear selected. Now, what I mean by selected is when we've checked the box in the grid. That's what I mean by a selected record. So if we checked off 3 crashes in the grid and we clicked zoom to selected, it will zoom to those 3. If I clear the selected, it unchecks those 3. It doesn't get rid of them. It just clears the check marks from those selected. However, remove selected actually removes the selected records, the ones that are checked, from the grid. Now, some people might say to yourself, well, why would I ever want to do that? I just did a query, and in this example, you can see in the screenshot where it says there's 75 records that came back from the query. So if you do remove selected, it's actually going to remove, let's say you checked 3, and you click this, it's going to remove those 3, and you're going to be down to 72. And you might say, well, isn't that weird? That would be misleading because I actually did a query that resulted in 75. Yes, the reason, the use case for that is you might do a query or someone share a query with you where, remember the example I said earlier of somebody saying, can you review these crashes and tell me if any of these need to be edited? Is there any errors either in the crash data, like the collision type of being rear end when it's currently coded as other, or maybe the crash has to be moved? This is a way for you to actually work your way through the list, and it's almost like a to-do list of crashes, and remove those so you don't lose track of what you've already looked at. It's very easy if you do a query of, say, 114 crashes to lose your place in there. And checking and unchecking gets very dicey with that. So we allow you to just remove them and to keep track. Clear filters, I showed you that earlier. It will remove all the column filters. Remove all records, I've used that before. This X will just clear the entire query results grid. Add to DOT queue. We'll come back to this with a dedicated slide in a minute, but essentially if you want to tell DOT, there's a series of administrators for Clear that will go through and be able to edit crashes for you. If you want to tell them, please change the collision type for this crash, for example, or move it, you can tell them that. You can select by checking crashes, add them to the DOT queue, and they'll go off and then they'll get updated per your request. We can save grid preferences if we start to reorder fields and turn fields on and off and all that type of settings we can do within the grid. We can save those preferences. Export results we'll come back to with a dedicated slide to export them into 3 formats. I sort of pinged that a little bit earlier with showing you how you create a case list. And then the generate batch report is really powerful that I'll come back to as well. That loads whatever selected cases, it will put it into an aggregated PDF. All the crash reports are aggregated. You get a single PDF downloaded to your computer. So if you did a query of 114 crashes and you selected 8 by checking them in the grid and you click generate batch report, it will generate a PDF with those 8 crash reports in a single PDF. Once again, one of the most requested features out there. So let's just show you a few of these. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, I'm going to use these AOIs, and I better refine this down and just sort of say probably K's and A's to keep these down. So I'm selecting crashes across all these AOIs over a 3-year period, and I've got 37 K's and A's across here. Okay. So now let's just talk about some of these things. So first of all, what I can do is I can zoom to selected. So if I select these 3 crashes and I hit zoom to selected, it's zooming to those. Now let me do this here because I don't know where these guys are. Let me zoom over here, and we see to that one. And which crash is this here? That one, this crash here is ends in 282. So wherever that guy is, where's 282? Well, let me show you this. Let me sort these. Okay. And the other thing I can do is I can find crashes within here. I don't want to waste a lot of time here. I wanted to just sort of zoom to a couple and together here. Well, there we go. There's this guy here. So now I've selected both of these crashes, and I can zoom to selected, and it's going to sort of come to this area, right? So that's what we can do. If I want to clear the selected crashes, okay, if I start checking these off and I clear selected, it clears the selection. Now, another way to clear a selection in a brute force fashion is to double click these. So let's say that I have 3. What this button up here does a select all. So if I wanted to clear these 3, I could also do it like this, is select them all, click that twice and it sort of selects them all and unselects them. That's another way of doing that. Remove selected. So remember the example where I said, well, I want to work my way through, let's say, these others, these collision types. And so they say, look at all these crashes. So if I looked at this guy here, and let's say I zoom to this guy, and there he is, and I looked at him and I go, no, I don't know what the collision type is. I'm not going to change this. What I can do here is I can remove this from the selected set and remove these. So if I remove it, notice how it removed it, and I'm down to 36 crashes. Maybe I looked at these 3 and I removed them and they're all gone. I'm down to 33. So this is how you can use the remove selected button to make it like a to-do list of looking at crashes for certain criteria, whether it's editing them or just looking at them. This clears the filter. So once again, if I say that I am going to filter, well, I already did K's and A's, filter the collision type, and I only want to see other, if I uncheck all those and I check other, okay, I'm only looking at other, but if I say clear filters, it will clear all the filters, and now I see them all, okay? This removes all records, so I'm not going to do that, but it'll clear the entire grid. And this is adding to the DOT queue. We'll come back to that in just a moment with a special slide on that. That is a whole nother animal, and it's something that's really, really powerful. Okay, this is save preferences. If I reordered things and I said, oh, I want access control over here and, et cetera, I want, the columns, we can turn columns on and off. So one of the things that we'll come back to in a minute, but I can say, I know I'm pulling this with my result fields, but I don't want crash time to be shown. So maybe you want it here just in case, but by default, I don't want to show crash time. So I can do that, and then I could save preferences and crash time would not appear. Crash time would come over as a result field and be here if I needed to see it, but maybe by default, I don't want it to appear in the grid, right? See the difference between the two? So I can set visibility, I can set order, etc. I can do a bunch of different things and save those preferences, okay? I'll come back to the query results and so on in a minute here. In the export results in a moment. Okay, let's talk about the query grid. A little bit more in terms of the advanced column and filter tools. So I just showed you a little bit of a sneak peek into this. So these columns and filters dialog. The filters dialog, when you click this button over to the right, really just gives you access in one place to being able to filter any of the fields. So you'd be able to go over here and just hit the expand collapse here in sort of an accordion panel style and check off filters like filter, I only want to see injury or PDO or whatever. The columns is that much more powerful. Not only does it control column visibility, it allows you to establish row groups or aggregating values, or to go into pivot mode and to actually change the columns and the rows so that you can pick whatever you want to be the columns. Like I'm going to do crash here in a minute here, and basically put whatever you want in terms of row groupings and really do some quick analysis in a pivot mode, and so on. So I'm going to just jump in and do this. So first of all, before I do this, I am going to do a vehicle level crash where you can start to see this, and I'm going to do a bit of a pivot table example here. So we're gonna jump in here and do some things here. So let me clear this. I'm going to reset all here. Let's just do that to start with. So first of all, what I'm going to do is let me first show you how you would do one of these vehicle or query crashes. Or to create crashes by person. I'm going to do either vehicle or person level, because what I haven't shown you yet is that sort of subheader yet, and I just realized that. Sorry to skip that. So I'm going to do, let's do a person level query. Okay, and what I'm going to do for a person level query is I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, I'm going to now customize the result fields, and I want a couple of extra fields here for crashes. Okay, but I want to come down here. Now that I've changed to vehicle and person, at least vehicle. If you put vehicle, you get these, person, you get both. So, and then I want to have person type and I want to have age. And for the vehicle, I want vehicle type and vehicle body type. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. So I've got some of these fields that are coming from vehicle and person level details. okay? And I'm going to come over here, and I've cleared all my AOIs out. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go down to Central Ave in Albany, New York, okay? I'm going to zoom around here. This is where I typically do a lot of my building of paths and so on. So let's go down here and let's do a query of crashes. So I'm going to draw a path. Let's do that. I'll show you build path again. We'll start, sort of up here. I'll start right around here and we'll come all the way down to here. Okay, so we're going to build a path between these two. Whoops, I picked an interesting spot. Let me come around. I'm gonna reset that. So there's your reset button right here. I'm gonna come up here and just do this. Okay, simple path here. Okay, so here we go. We've got our path. We've got our boundary that's been buffered by 20 feet, etc. Okay. And I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to just execute, and I'm going to select all the crashes that occurred along here over that 3-year period. And what I'm going to get, however, though, is I did a person level query. So I'm going to get one record per person, per vehicle, per crash, right? So since I'm asking for a little more data, it's taking a few seconds to go and do this. And so I've got, I forget how many crashes I'll get here. I did a pretty long stretch of Central Ave here, so sorry, it's taken more time. 922 crashes. You can see the clustering and so on. But one of the things that I didn't show you earlier that I wanted to is, remember I grabbed a couple other crash fields. So as I scroll across here, you're going to see it turn into those 3 vehicle. We automatically get vehicle sequence number. I chose body type and vehicle type. So these are the vehicle level details, which you appear in red here. Then the person level fields, remember we automatically get person sequence number when we do a person level query, and then I got person type and age. Okay, those are the 2 that I selected. So this little subheader under here is where you're going to see this grouping. Then what we can actually do here is I can collapse this. Since there's a lot of crash fields, I could collapse that and bring my vehicle and person level fields over here farther to the left. The other thing that I can do here is I could actually collapse my query form so they have a little bit more horizontal space if I want to be able to do this. So I hope that sort of makes sense in a general sense here. So that's how we get, that's how you do a person level query, and that's how you see these records coming back. So for example, you're going to see duplicate case numbers here. So I'm going to just select all 3 of these so they're highlighted. This is all case 609, okay? And you can see where we're getting back, let's look across this record. I've got, this is vehicle number 2 in the crash. This is vehicle number 1. Well, why is vehicle number 1 repeated? Because I did a person level crash, and this is person 1 and person 2 in vehicle 1. So it looks to me like person 1 and 2, there was a driver and a passenger in this vehicle, which was a pickup truck, and it hit a Suburban, and the Suburban's vehicle 2, and there only is 1 person, so I assume that it was just the driver in that vehicle. See how that makes sense and how we can do that and why we get repeated records. And we can see that the person level data for this, the driver was 24 years old, the passenger was 23, and the driver over in vehicle 2 was 40. Okay, so that's how you can do a person level query. Same thing with vehicle. If I did a vehicle level query, though, I wouldn't get the person level details. I would only get vehicle and crash and so on. And once again, we have all the different things that we can do over here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, to demonstrate a little further these columns over here, I'm going to do another crash, and I'm going to grab some fields. I'm going to make this a little bit more simplistic, but I want to be able to show you how you can do things like using row groupings and pivot tables and so on. So let me come back over and expose my query form, and I'm going to reset all, okay? And it clears everything. And so now what I want to do is I want to say, okay, what I want to build is saying, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to set my dates to a little narrower range, okay? I'm going to actually input, and I want 1/1/2018, okay? And I've typed this in when I did my last demo, so it remembers. And I'm going to do 12/31/2019. I'm going to go over just a 2-year period, okay? I'm going to come down here and I'm going to set my result fields, and I'm going to pick case year, and I'm going to pick collision type, and I'm also going to pick crash type, just those 3 additional fields, and I'm going to hit OK. So I'm going to do a crash level query. Okay, and I'm going to do all this. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my AOI. Let's go next. I will select features and I'll set my AOI to be the MPO, and I'm going to pick CDTC again. I'm going to add that to my AOI. And then my step 3 is what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my crash characteristics and I'm going to set my max injury and crash. I'm going to pick just fatal. And I'm going to hit execute, and I'm going to get back a number of crashes here. I've got 79 crashes back, all right? And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just show you how we can get into pivot table mode over here and really exercise this stuff. So if I open up the columns over here, I have all the columns here. And once again, what I showed you earlier is I could turn off, I could turn on and off crash severity, see how it's on or off, and I can just display it or hide it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go through here and show you a couple things. First of all, what I can do here is I could set my row grouping. I can drag fields into the row group. So, I could do this. I could say I want to drag case here down here, and I can group these so that we're looking at 39 in 2018 versus 40 crashes in 2019. I can hit X and clear that. I could grab and put collision type down here, and I can group these by collision type. Okay, so we've got all these types of ways of doing row groupings and so on. But I'm going to go into pivot table mode, and what it does is when I go into pivot table mode, it's always automatically going to put a count based on the case number. So we have 79, and that's all I have right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab and drag crash type, and you grab it by this little dotted graphic here, and I'm going to pull that down into the row group. So I've got crash type in the row group, and now notice what we have. By changing this to pivot table mode, I've got my columns here are the counts of the case number. So I have collision with pedestrian as one of the groupings, which is crash type, and there's 17 of these. And there's 7 collision with a tree and 28 collision with a motor vehicle, and you can see them on there. But I can also change my column labels, and I can grab, let's say I wanted to divide this out in the columns by case year. I can grab case year and pull that down to a column label, and now I've pivoted this, and I've changed my groups, which are grouped by crash type, and I've done a column label, and I've broken out those 2 years, and you can see that these 17 crashes, I've got 9 and 8. These 7 collision with the trees, they're 4 and 3, and you can see how this breaks down across the years. So pivot table mode is really powerful to be able to sort of turn this on its ear and put whatever, group the rows however you want, and it will aggregate them together with counts. And then you could change the column labels to be any number of things, right? So I've got, if I take away the column labels, it just does a simple count based on these groups. But, I've got, crash type. I could do, drag crash severity over here and say, well, these 17, what do I have? Well, since I did all Ks, obviously we've got, fatals are counting for all of these. But if I had done all of these crashes, which I don't want to do, I'd have a whole different thing. So I can, just change these all around. Very, very powerful. So that's what the column tool allows you to do. So I'm going to take off pivot mode, and we can, I can clear out the row groups, and I can clear out the values and all that. And I just go back to my basic dialog. Okay. So very powerful. And that's a little bit about that tool. Last couple of things on this section of the talk here, adding to the DOT queue. We sort of alluded to this earlier, but this was that example where I was talking about where if you want to ask DOT to edit the crashes and change the crash types or or remove the crashes, whatever it is, you can add cases to the queue. It's this button down here. And basically what you are allowed to do is you can go through and say, I'm requesting an edit. And there are 2 types of edits. You can either edit the attributes or you can relocate the crash. I would suggest if you're going to do more than one, in this screenshot, you can see where we selected 3 cases, that they all should have the exact same edit you're going to be applying. So for example, maybe you found 3 cases and you checked them off over here and you said, I want to add these to the DOT queue. And I say, please change the severity to property damage. Now, what you're asking is for them to change all three. All three crashes will come up in the queue. So if you do this, be very careful. If you need a different edit to happen to different crashes, put them in one at a time with the request type and the comment. Please make your comment as specific as you can. Don't just say, update the crash type or whatever. Tell them exactly what you want it to be updated to, or if it's the relocation. Those in particular really need some exact comments in here. So the way this looks in the application is, let's say that I saw this collision type of other, and I said, well, I just reviewed all these guys, and I really would like these three to be updated to rear end. So can you please do that? So what I can do is say, add to the DOT queue. What's the select type? We'll say edit. And so now I can say that, please, so I could say, change the collision type to, and I'll just say right angle, whatever it is, right? And so when I do this, when I hit submit, those three have been added successfully to the DOT queue. It is an edit request. Let's say that I looked at this one. Let me clear the selected, right? So, oh, by the way, let me be very clear. We probably should have separated these buttons. We have them together because they're sort of functionally equivalent, but be very careful you don't remove these selected. I wanted to just clear the check marks. So clear that. Let's say that this particular crash, and let me zoom to it, and I said, I really wish that they would move this about 30 feet to the south. And so I can add that to the DOT queue. This one, what you want to do is hit relocate, and it remembers your last comment in case you're going to add a whole bunch with a very similar, that you're changing a whole bunch to right angle. You don't have to change the comment. But for a relocation, let's say move this crash 30 feet to the south. Now, if this is what you're going to tell them, that's fine. But a lot of times you might want to find, some other, move it to this reference marker, or move it so it overlaps the river that runs underneath, whatever it might be. But be very simple and very specific in your request. Okay. So that's how you can add things to the DOT queue. So very simple. We're requesting an edit or a relocation. Okay. Now, next, we've got exporting results. I showed you earlier how we can export to a case list. We can actually take this in a couple of different ways. We can export to a CSV file. The CSV file is going to export all the fields that you see there in your query results grid. You can export just the CSV case list, the middle option. That's going to export just the case numbers. And the case numbers are going to be able to be reopened as that case list in the simple basic query, as I showed you. Then lastly, we can export to a shapefile. So we've talked about how this goes earlier in terms of importing a shapefile and how we can export an AOI to a shapefile. But the export of this shapefile will export the points. So in this case, the screenshot, we have 17 records selected. If we pick shapefile, it'll export these 17 points with these fields as their attributes to a shapefile. That's usually used if somebody wants to go, because these are points. These aren't things you would use for an area of interest. You can't, these are points, so you can't import them as an area of interest. This would be if you're going to use it in another GIS package like ArcGIS Desktop or ArcGIS Pro or something like that, or ArcGIS Online. You can do that. Okay. So before we get into saving a query, let me just show you what this means. So basically we have 79 features here. So once again, I could export a CSV file of all the fields. I can export that. You see how it opens right here. So if I open this up and double click it, it's going to open up with a CSV file. Oh, I only had one selected record. Keep that in mind. Only one record came out with that particular file because it was selected. Okay, it exports these selected. When you look at the dialog, read it. Export selected records, CSV. The case list will export just the case list and shapefile. So that's all it looks like. Pretty simple overall. Okay, we'll come back to generate batch report in a little bit. So let me go back to the saving a query. So shifting gears a little bit, saving a query. I mentioned earlier how you can export AOIs to be reused. We can export a case list to be reused. Well, those are other sort of more granular options. But if you want to actually save your entire query and reuse it, including sharing it with somebody else, what you can do is save it and give it a name, and it will save the entire query definition in the system with a name, and then you can reopen it yourself or you can share it with others to be used. So let's just, once again, one important thing on the slide is just the query definition and the parameters are saved. The results of the query are not saved. So if you did a query of, I want all rear end crashes in this particular area of interest in this year's, et cetera, and I want these 5 result fields, if you save the query, that's what you're saving. And the reason it's not saving the data is that if you opened that query up, and I'll show you in a moment how you do that, if you open that query up and re-applied it, re-executed it 8 days from now, you might get different crashes that are within that area of interest, right? Because we just pulled new crashes every day from DMV for the last 8 days. So query definitions are just the definition themselves. So how do we save a query? Let's say I want to save this. So I've got, what do I have here for my areas of interest? Let me go back over and look. Oh yeah, this is fatal crashes within the entire CDTC. No, I don't know why I'm doing this. I should be zooming to my area of interest within the entire CDTC MPO boundary, right? So if I wanted to save this, the save button, by the way, I went back to location. The save button is only on step 3, okay? Because we want to enforce that you always have a valid query and that you've got advanced past the location tab, because the location tab requires one area of interest. So I'm going to click Save As, and you can see I've got a couple of other samples here. So I'm going to save this as Demo 3. This is our third class of CDV. So I'm going to save this with Demo 3. And ideally what I could do is do in one shot is I could share this with another user. Okay, I can pick this, but I'm not going to share it. I'm going to show you that later. So I'm going to hit save, and I've now saved that query. Okay, so now let me hit reset. I'm going to try to reopen that query because one of the things is opening a saved query definition. So I'm going to hit reset all as if I was starting over, right? I have no, if I go to the step 2, I have no AOIs, I have nothing. But back at step 1, we have an open button, and the open button, and notice that I see my query here. Open allows you to reopen a saved query, and there's 2 little buttons here. These are queries, my queries is default, and it's all the queries I have saved. Okay, you can see created by me over here. I'm logged in as E Crabapple. We're using all Simpson characters on our development server for funsies. And then the shared queries are basically anything that was created by somebody other than me, B Simpson, B Gumble, etc., that have been shared with me. So I can open these the same way I can open mine. So I'm going to open up Demo 3. And if I open up Demo 3, notice it sets my AOI, sets that custom range to 2018, 2019. And if I walk all the way over here, you can see that it's fatal only. If I execute this query, it's going to do the exact same query as before and come back with the exact same 79 crashes. But I have to re-execute it again, okay? Let's say that I go back to step 1 and I want to just open up a different query. I want to open up this Route 5, all crashes that I did in the last demo. This was another query that I saved, okay? This is a path along Route 5. What do I got here? It's a path. What do I got here? It's all the crashes. So if I execute that, that's going to grab all crashes along here. And that's how you can save and re-execute queries and open them. Hopefully that makes sense, okay? Last couple of slides before we wrap up and open it up for questions. This is the little slide that I just sort of talked over with the opening a saved query, where you hit open on step 1. This is using the selection set to limit the query. So this is a sort of complicated way of saying a pretty simple theory is I bypass this, but on step 1, you have the ability to select from the currently selected features. Now, what I mean by that is usually when you do every single query we've done starts from scratch and it looks at all the queries, okay? This is a way where you can select from what was queried. And I think I just saw a flash of, can you daisy chain queries? This is where we're heading with this. So the example that I'm going to give you in a moment is, let's say that what we wanted to do is we want to select motorcycle crashes in the city of Albany. And then what we want to do is we want to try to find the other vehicles that were involved in those crashes, the other vehicles, not the motorcycles themselves, other vehicles, and look at those vehicles, but only those we want to apply another criteria where they were changing lanes, which there's a field called pre-crash action we can exercise. So what this allows us to do is select from the, instead of looking at all crashes, is use the current selection set to limit the query. And on step 2, you have a way to ignore the AOIs, these spatial queries, because since you're going to select from previously selected crashes, you've already determined that's the universe, so you don't need to apply geography again. You can, but it slows things down. You can optimize the query by ignoring that. So really quickly, let me just show you how to do this. So I'm going to reset all, and I'm going to do a couple of queries here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my default date range. I'm going to do a vehicle level query, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to customize the result fields, and I'm going to select all the vehicle details, okay? Next, what I'm going to do, say vehicle query, and I've got the vehicle details. Next, I'm going to select a location, and I'm going to select the select features, and I'm going to do all of Albany, the city of Albany. So I'm going to select municipality, and I'm going to select the county of Albany, and then within the county, I'm going to select the city of Albany, and I'm going to add that to my area of interest, and we're going to use the city of Albany. And in step 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the vehicle characteristics, which we haven't been into yet, and I'm going to select a vehicle type of motorcycle, okay? And that's it, and I'm going to execute. And this is going to give me all the motorcycle crashes in the city of Albany in that time frame, okay? So I believe what I'm going to get back is about 54 of these, and these are all the crashes that involved a motor vehicle in the city of Albany over that 3-year period. Now, when these come back, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to step 1, and I'm going to select that use the selection set limiting part of the query. Okay, so here you go. Here's the 54 crashes right here. And you can see if I scroll over, because I selected vehicle details, all of them, you can see where I've got motorcycle. Now you can see that there's pre-crash conditions on this particular vehicle. And this vehicle, you can see where this motorcycle may have been changing lanes. But what we're after is, were the crash of these motorcycles, was it caused perhaps by another vehicle that they collided with changing lanes into them? So we want to start with these 54, and I'm going to go back over to step 1, and I'm going to say, scroll down to the bottom here, and I'm going to turn this on and say, I want to select from just these 54. Do not look anywhere else except these 54 crashes, okay? And basically, when I go to step 2, I'm going to leave this checked. I don't need to look at any more geography. I have the 54. The geography I was interested in was City of Albany. So when I go to step 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the vehicle characteristics to say I'm no longer looking for vehicles that are motorcycle. I am going to be looking for all the other vehicle types. Okay, so I'm looking for crashes, these crashes, and I'm looking for any other vehicle types that were involved in these crashes. And I only want those vehicles where their pre-crash action was changing lanes. Okay, so we're going to select from these 54 where the other vehicle type was one of the other ones, which is the rest. So if this was a motorcycle crash that just ran into a pole or something like that, it's not going to get selected here. It's where another vehicle type was involved in the crash, and that vehicle type's pre-crash action was changing lanes, not the motorcycle changing lanes, the other vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and this should whittle this down from 54 down to 4. So here's an example where if we scroll over, they all are changing lanes. So this particular motorcycle collided with a 4-door sedan that was changing lanes. Maybe that's a problem area. And then we look at where these crashes occurred, and we can see, was geography involved? Is it because it's a corner where they're changing lanes? And if it happens they're changing lanes on a corner, that's a difficult thing, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, that's an example how we can select from and sort of chain these queries together. Okay, going to wrap it up in just a couple seconds here. Managing saved queries, last couple slides. We can manage queries and we can rename and delete and all these queries that we have saved. We can rename them, we can copy them, we can delete them, we can share them with others. So we have an entire manage queries page where we can select them and do things with them. So how do you share a saved query? What we can do is we can select that query from the manage queries grid. We can click share, and we can either share it with a specific set of users and pick one or more, or you'll notice I showed this from a screenshot. You guys cannot, a regular user can't share with all users. That is a way, that is an indication for an administrator at DOT to say, hey, we've created this very cool query that looks at fatal crashes by whatever. And we're going to share this with everybody that's in the clear system, because we're going to, and then maybe you might get an email or an announcement about it, like, hey, everybody, look at this particular query. We shared it with you. It's something you can use to do X with. So that's really limited to them. But if you want to share a query with other users in your county or your MPO or whatever, you can do that. So what it does is when you share it, it will appear under the all queries for the other user. The way this looks is we go to our manage queries dialog, and you can see that these three queries, I have not shared them with anybody, but let's say that I wanted to share demo 3 with B. Simpson. I can check that, the buttons activate, I click share, and it says, who do you want to share it with? Right now, there's nobody. I'll say with a specific user, and I'll say B. Simpson. And if I also wanted to say P. Skinner, I can pick more than one. And then I come out here and I click share, and you can see that now it is shared with B. Simpson and P. Skinner. And if they went to their manage queries dialog and they looked at, or they went to, open a query, for example, and they go under all queries, they would see this. They would be able to open demo 3. Before that, they would have never seen it. Okay. Last couple slides. That is how you share it. Now in the same manage queries dialog, what you can see here is I can actually copy, rename, and delete. Now I can only copy, rename, and delete queries that that I have created. I should take that back. I can copy a query that was shared with me, but I can only rename and delete queries that I have created. Obviously, we don't want to rename queries somebody else shared with us. So how do you do that? Very simple. If I want to rename demo 3, I just come up here, I select it, and I can call this demo 4 instead. I hit rename, and it renames it. If I want to copy that query, I can hit copy, and it will automatically come up default to just append the -copy on it. I can do that, and I've made a copy of that. When you copy it, you have the exact same sharing principles with it. And if I wanted to delete that copy I just made, I can click that and I can say delete, and it'll remove it. So this is under managed queries. Okay, that's where this all comes from. And finally, the last thing that I'll share with you on the slides is the crash report viewer for the batch reporting. So, whoops, sorry, go back to a previous slide. I will thank you in a minute, but let me go back to the previous one. This is what I showed you earlier in terms of the police reports and so on. But while the same crash report viewer comes up with a single report when we are querying from the query results panel, right? So we can access this from the query results grid, but we can also access it from a tool to generate batch reports in batch. So let me show you what this looks like. So if we go back to our advanced thing, so this is that crash report viewer with a single crash that I accessed by simply clicking on a particular query over here, right? So if I went back over here and I said, let me reset all and do what I did earlier. If I went up to basic and I just did a search for a crash and I just find this guy, this is what I was showing you earlier. You click this button and it displays a crash report, and that's how I got to this. Well, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is I can actually go into the crash report viewer this way, and it brings it up, and I have this ability to, I can search by a case number and bring up an individual case. I can import a case list. So if I wanted to create a batch PDF of all these. So once again, if I wanted to load a case list, I can hit load. I can double click my demo, and those same 13 cases that I showed you earlier when I generated them in the query results grid, I can click generate batch report. Now I can't do this one. The batch report, the crash report I showed you was a dummy. I can't click this because it would actually generate real reports with personal information, so I'm not going to do that. But what this does is it will generate a PDF file down here that I can just download to my system, and it'll be an aggregated. So let's say there were exactly one crash report for all these cases. I would get one PDF with 13 crash reports in it. Okay, very, very powerful function. The other way that we can do that, though, is let's say that I do a query. So let's go to my advanced query, and I'm going to just do this typical thing where I draw a little rectangle here, boom, and I add that to my AOI, and I do next, and I execute a crash, and I do this big sophisticated query, and I end up with 128 crashes, and I want to take those, and I want to add them. I can click generate a batch report, and it will automatically take all those. I don't know why it was asking me to log in there. And it will automatically do that, and it will load all 128 crashes right into here. So that is an expedited way to say, I just did a query, right? And I basically am going to go back and generate a batch report directly from my query. So I don't have to save a case list. I don't have to search for them and add them. I can do it directly from the crash data viewer. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That is a really highly requested feature. So with that, I will say I am done. I appreciate all your attention. So Andrew, I know that Gary probably was answering most of the chat in there, if there's anything outstanding. But Andrew, do you have any closing comments before we turn it over to questions? And I know that we're up against it. It's a few minutes before 12. If you have to drop off, no worries whatsoever. Thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff in there to pack into 3 hours, and I know I was talking fast, but hopefully you got this all together. Andrew will be distributing the slides here very soon. We are going to timestamp this video so that you know at what points we talked about what subjects. And so we'll give you that as well. So we'll give you the videos, timestamps, and the slides as a PDF file here coming up that you can refer to. But Andrew, anything else to jump in with to answer any questions that might have been thrown your way?
Well, thanks, Larry, for that training. That was fantastic, and appreciate that. And everyone, a lot of questions in the chat, so appreciate all those, and appreciate everyone's patience, with rolling this thing out. I think I just wanted to make one thing clear, and that was that it's not actually live yet. You'll probably get the URL and the link, whatever it is, all that kind of information towards the end of January. So it's some people, I think we're looking for the URL in here, but it's not live yet. So there'll be a lot of information on our webpage and everything, our accident analysis toolbox webpage. So check in there for more information. You can always check with us to see where things are at, because this is a big rollout, a lot of pieces here. So if you're not sure where we're at, just shoot us an email. And that's it.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the videos are going to be quite large, so they'll be posted on the website that Andrew was referring to probably, or well, Andrew will give you the heads up on where they are, but they're very large, so you're going to have to download them. Don't look for that via email or anything. Some of the other materials can both be downloaded, and you may get emails on certain things as well as attendees of this training, but the file for the video will be very large. Once again, the Alice applications, when we launch these phase 1 applications later in January, we will shut off the other Alice pieces except for SQRA. That will remain open for a period of time. I don't know whether it'll be a few months, longer than that. We don't know. Andrew can give you further guidance on that, but it won't go away right away. But the crash data will cease going into Alice. So the crashes that you would be querying that are most recent won't be there. But if you're going back and looking at, a couple of years ago for doing some sort of little safety analysis, you can still do that. Those crashes will be still in the system.
Yeah, and for those that work with applications or something that are integrated with crash data, all those applications, will change when we go live with Clear. So just check internally, with your group that those should be all set. Things like ADRP and other stuff. So. Larry, okay if I open up the questions then?
Yeah. If anybody has questions that we didn't get to here, I saw somebody just ask, will the chat be included in the recording? And I believe it should. So that
all
should.
the public chat will be in there.
Yep, we'll include that. A couple of last questions. I think I can't tell. Sorry, I had chat turned off on mine, obviously, since I was sharing my screen. But the last couple of things. Thank you for the kind words in the chat. The last one just was, when you enter Street View in Google, will it carry your personal settings into Clear? Not with Google Street View. There's no real correlation. Google Street View is sort of this other, this entirely separate system. So there's no real, it's other than us just launching it in a separate browser window. There's really no dance there that's going on. I think, Gary, I'm not sure if there were any questions that in chat as you were monitoring them that needed to be forwarded over to Andrew.
No, I don't believe so. I think we got them all.
Okay, good. Andrew, was there anything else though that you heard me miss that you wanted to mention before? And if anybody wants to ask a question, perhaps you could use the raise your hand function in here to let Andrew or I know that you're going to want to ask a question, so we don't have everybody talking at the same time. I'm able to stay on. I know it's 12 o'clock, and if you have to hop, by all means, I apologize for running a couple minutes over, but there's a lot to cram in. But I'm able to stay past noon if we need to.
Yeah, I did unmute everybody. So if you do have a question or something, just raise your hand or just speak out if there's not too many people.
I just saw a question come in real quickly from it says R2 Region 2 traffic, I guess. Can the intersection size or polygons be modified? I assume you're talking about the areas of influence, the area of influence polygons, which is something that
you said you're going to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Okay, I guess I'll take lunch now because I was just doing Q&A.
Okay. Yeah. So
I was wanting to kind of listen in.
Okay.
See if there's anything, but everything.
So just on that question about intersection size, the polygons, the areas of influence polygons are managed by Andrew and the team at New York State DOT. So, okay, yeah, thanks, Gary. It looks like we do have a few hands raised here, so we'll try to call on folks here in a minute.
Sorry, someone was talking there, so I remuted everybody. Let me try and get to the raised hands here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard for me to see the raised hands.
Larry, this is Gary. Did you fully answer that question about the intersection?
No,
size?
I was going to kick it over to Andrew. Go ahead, Gary, if you want to jump in on that.
Well, I was just going to say, absolutely, we can modify the intersection boundaries, and maybe I should leave that to Andrew too, because you can kind of select it and re-digitize around it, but I don't know if you can modify the intersection polygon directly. So, Andrew, are you aware if we can do that?
Yeah. So you have two options. If it's a really kind of interesting intersection and our standard 100-foot legs and what's included in that area of interest doesn't really match the intersection, with our intersection manager tool, that's something that the Office of Traffic and Safety handles. We can modify that intersection area of influence to be more appropriate. And then, like Gary said, the second option is within your query, once you've kind of added that, I believe there is a way to edit it within within that query process. That
Yeah,
might be in the clear
Andrew, the way
safety.
well, there's if you're gonna just do a query, here's a short. It's not a really short shortcut. But as I was showing earlier, if you selected an intersection and it added the area of influence polygon to as an AOI, you can't edit it directly in there, but you can export that AOI to a shapefile, then re-import the AOI from the shapefile, which ends up adding it as a graphic, and then you can edit it from the little edit AOI tool up there and reshape it. So if you want Andrew to change the area of influence polygon for the intersection, you can make that request and they can handle it through the intersection inventory manager tool, and that would be a permanent change. But if you wanted to just change that area of influence, start with the default and reshape it and take one leg and go down the other way, you can do that manually in that way. Add the intersection, export it to a shapefile, import it back from a shapefile, and then you'll have it as a graphic essentially, and you can edit it. Hope that makes sense.
So yeah, we had a couple questions I was going to try to get to. Looks like Michael, you had your hand raised. You could go ahead and unmute yourself. Or type it in the chat. Another question, hand raised here. I'm going to say this wrong, probably Sazadur. I think you can unmute yourself, or no, did I not?
By the way, while we're fielding that, I just shared my screen again for folks. So what I did here was to answer that previous question, I selected this. Oops, sorry, somebody else talking. Go ahead.
I think I unmuted everyone again. Sorry, Larry.
Okay, I was just gonna say real quickly, I'll show you what I did. I just did part of it. I just added this intersection. So here's an area of influence. I can't edit this, but if I wanted to start with this and edit it, what I just did is I clicked this and it exported it to a shape file, okay, a zip shape file. So now what I can do is I could remove that one, okay, and I can import a shape file and import it from this guy here. So now I've imported it, and remember when you import a shapefile, it comes in as a graphic. So now I can actually click the edit tool, click inside it to expose the vertices, and I can actually run this area of influence up the street further if I wanted, and then complete it, and then use that as an AOI. So that's a way around that, so to speak, to start with an area of influence with the default extensions. And I think Gary, I saw in chat where he had said that the default distance out that we're going a leg is 100 feet.
Yeah,
so that's that.
The default, yep, default is 100 feet, and yeah, like you said, just right there, you can edit it right within the query. If it's we can change the authoritative version, so it comes up like that every time. That's like another request. Maybe you could send in. And what else was I going to say, Larry?
I'm not sure.
I think there's probably 10 other ways you could probably go about this. You draw your own polygon, or just add area around it, adding a separate polygon on top of that, to get the additional space. Number of ways to do that, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Other questions? I'm not sure if we got a unmuted, Andrew. I forget where we're at here. I'm going to stop sharing again and so I can see the screen. I can't really see hands raised. Does anybody else have a question
Yeah.
they wanted to jump in with? Oh, I see. What I saw somebody's hand raised. Yeah. Oh, you already called on Sazador.
That's the only other hand I see there.
Yeah, and I know we're over time here. I apologize for that. I really appreciate the attention though. So once again, thank you for attending and thanks for your attention. We'll get this stuff out there as quick as we can. Stay tuned for this. And if this was sort of the prerequisite for some other training that's going to be coming. So some of you will also get trained in the interactive crash editor. Those from DMV will get interactive crash locator, and ultimately, when we're into the safety program in phase 2. Some of you will be using the Clear Safety app. So many other training classes coming down the pike here in the next several weeks, as well as right around down into March. Looks like Region 2 traffic had another question, Andrew.
Yeah, just answering that in the chat, but let me say that out loud. So the way we kind of handle the data updates to roads and things like that is the whole Clear application takes a snapshot of the LRS data every year. So as they update that data throughout the year, at a certain point, we'll take that and then we process that data so it gets into the formats that we use for Clear, and all the changes to the roadway or roadway attributes, those will all be reflected in the next year's snapshot, and we use the snapshot with the crash data, to match those time periods up, so we have the most accurate roadway for that year, and that helps to match it up with all the analysis and all the statistics that we calculate at the beginning of the year, so that's all synchronized throughout the year. Hopefully that answers the question.
Any other last minute questions before we wrap up?
It will not be your last opportunity to ask questions. The Office of Traffic and Safety is always available. There's a couple different ways you can get a hold of us. We have a special Clear mailbox that some of you might have gotten an email from, and we have a bunch of people that can respond to questions in there, and or reach out to me or Robert Zatowski, and we'll try to answer your questions and make sure everyone's good and comfortable setting up with this new system when it's needed. And when it's live and all that. So
all right.
Appreciate everyone coming. We will wrap it up then, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks again, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Have happy holidays, and we'll be back at you with more training here in the coming weeks. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.